What is up, guys? Alex from ANAK Creates here, and today we're going to do a bit of a track breakdown, look into one of my mixes that I recently did for Sons of Horus. We're going to take a look into my mixing session, kind of explore how I approached the mix on this song and the different elements that are involved in this track. Now, big shout out to Malcolm Cottle from Sons of Horus, who has given me the okay to bring you along and look into the session. Today we're going to be looking at the first single from the Sons of Horus record, which is called History Will Absolve Me. Now, be sure to go check out the official music video for this, which I will link in the description below, as well as the whole record, which I did mix, is available on all streaming platforms as well. Now, this is kind of a punk metal kind of a record, fast songs, heavy distorted guitars, big drums. Now, something really cool about this track and this whole record in general is Malcolm recorded it himself. This was done with minimal gear, but the knowledge of what he needed to track so that I could mix it as best as possible. So everything in this track is super possible for you to do at home as well. So first off, I'm just going to play the beginning of the song so you can get a bit of a feel of what the sound is, and then we'll start looking around the session. So right off the top of the song, there's actually those little distorted drums that happen, and that's actually a print of drums that were given to me by Malcolm, and that's just a separate audio file. It's not the drum tracks, and that just has some distortion on it, a white boost, and then I actually just filtered it out with this GRM Tools bandpass filter so that it's really mid-heavy. Then the actual drums come in, and the drums in this song are actually completely programmed, and Malcolm is a drummer by trade, so he knows how to program drums really in depth, so he goes through every hit and makes sure that he can actually play it, and that it's programmed kind of velocity sensitive, so it does change around, so it sounds a bit more real. We use Drum Forge, but the way that I mix them is I don't mix it in the plugin itself. I actually stem it out. So you can see here that there's actually a kick, a snare, toms, kit. The shells is kind of a separate bus that they have coming out of there, and cymbals, which is another kind of separate bus. Those are the kind of the stems that I could get out of Drum Forge itself. I have that so that I can mix it a little bit more traditionally like I would for an actual drum kit. I'm just not a big fan of mixing within those plugins. I just am comfortable with using tracks, so I just use aux tracks and mix them outside of that plugin. So all of those individual tracks go through a master drum bus down here, which just has a compressor on it, a parallel compression kind of a thing. This Wolf compressor is really great. I love what it does. It crunches it up and it makes it a little bit brighter. So I use that. And then it's going through this folder track, which is a routing folder track in Pro Tools. This is where I added some of the effects. So I'll show you right off the top what I mean, because in the mix, this was something that I had added that Malcolm had not done in the production that I thought would be a really cool little thing. And that's that kind of tape slowdown at the beginning of the song. So I'll play it right here. So it just kind of emphasizes as everything hits, but that kind of tape slowdown sound is actually just on the drums, and that is this tape stop plugin right here. So the drums themselves sound like this. And it's actually the first hit of the actual drums that come in, not the distorted drums at the beginning. And then another part in the track, the drums get really distorted and small, which I'll play for you here. But I wanted a little distorted sound here. So it's actually an automation. You can see the two automation lanes here of the white boost distortion that's just really boosting some low end just to give it a bit of blown out low end sound and some distortion, taking back the top end a little bit. But then also at the same time, I'm also automating on this EQ, which is essentially a bandpass, but then I boosted around 600 just to give it that kind of cell phony type quality to it, as bandpass distorted sound. So a lot of what's coming through is the distortion, but you can still actually hear what's happening because it is still keeping the rhythm in that section. So moving on on to the bass. The bass in this song is actually a bass DI right here and a print of an amp sim that Malcolm had. And I just compressing each one a little bit with a CLA 2A on both. And I have a trim plugin here, which is actually just flipping the phase. This is something that you got to be aware of. A lot of amp sims tend to mess with the phase a little bit. And then those are going through a series of plugins up here, which I'm really thickening out the sound. So first, I'll play the bass with the way that it is right now, and then I'll bypass all those plugins, and you'll see what the original tracks actually sounded like with just their basic compression. So the purpose of the bass for me is to kind of hold the bottom end and the whole low part of the track, and I don't want it to waver a lot. So especially when paired with all the guitar layers, it wasn't a big enough sound. So I added an EQ on here, which boosted some bottom end and some clarity because I did need a bit more clarity. And then again, this Wolf compressor, I just love this compressor. It just really holds the bass together. Tape head, which just crunches it up a little bit more. White boost, again, a little bit more distortion. Then I kind of do a little bit of EQ. I needed a bit more bottom end, taking out some of the muddy middles and then boosting a bit more of the clarity around 2K. Finally, I put it through this Black Ops distortion, which is a Pro Tools plugin, really crunchy. And that's kind of, frankly, what makes up most of the bass sound that you're hearing is this distortion itself. But it is very aggressive, so it's actually only mixed at 10%, but it's the very signature kind of top end sound that you're hearing in the bass sound overall. So moving along to the guitars, we have the rhythm guitars and the lead guitars through the song. Now, the way that Malcolm recorded the guitars, which is something that I definitely do myself, is there are two different sounds in this song that make up the rhythm guitar sound. So it's just kind of the main sound down here, and then this one augments those big sections that we want to be brought up to the next level and add a bit more impact. So overall, this is what the guitars sound like. And you can tell that they're not super huge sounding. There's a lot that has been kind of rolled off. There's a lot of top end added to them just to keep them very aggressive. And that bass, that's why I need the bass to be extra thick, because the bass is holding the bottom end of the guitars as well. It's not as much of its own thing in the mix or for most of the mix as it is an extension of these rhythm guitars. So they kind of work together really, really nicely. Now, because of the style of music, the rhythm guitars are quite bright because they have to keep that aggression going. But added on top of that are the lead guitars, which are a bit brighter, but they're different. They're doing a different part, and also they are just higher notes. But they're still kind of equally as bright as the rhythms. There's definitely, both of them work really well together. So the lead guitars, as you can hear, they're pretty thin there. They're peaking. I didn't really pay attention to that because it's distorted, so it doesn't matter. And then another one adds in here. And they're both very bright. They're both in the same kind of range, but they are definitely complementing each other and working together because the parts were well crafted. But this second lead guitar comes in, and to make it stand out a little bit more, I also added a bit of a delay on it, so it has a bit more room on it compared to the other one. And then in classic Sons of Horus style, Malcolm has also added a violin, which just had to be bright and kind of stick out a little bit. And the way that I viewed using it was more to have that tonality of having strings in there, but it didn't actually have to carry any weight, and more it just kind of opened up the top end of the track during the pre-choruses and chorus, so that's how I treated it. It's very thin on its own. Then moving along, we have the vocals. Now, there are two vocalists on this track. First of all, we have the guest, who is Jaques of Travesty, and his vocals are all down here. We have background vocals by the producer, Emmett O'Reilly. His vocals are down here, so he added a bunch of layers. And then Malcolm did all the screaming, and his vocals are up here. So going through the tracks, we're just going to look at Malcolm's vocal here. There's a few different layers. Come, my friends! As you can tell, it's quite big, and he did a double of his main scream, which is a left and a right version of it. And then he also added a whisper track. So the whisper is just the same thing, but it just adds a bit of clarity to it and a bit of aggression to it. Even though it's a whisper, it adds the aggression. And the way that I treated these vocals was these two were panned out left and right, and then the whispers were panned out a little bit further, because what happens is they kind of trade back and forth between Malcolm and Travis during this section. So Travis had a lead part that was dead center in the middle, and Malcolm was more about being the width and just kind of fitting around Travis. And we'll get to Travis's vocal in a second. And in the treatment, there is a lot of compression on it. There's a bunch of EQ to kind of bring out the air on the whole thing. It just wasn't overly bright when I got it, and I really wanted the aggression to come through, and especially trying to stick out over the guitars. So as you can see, there's a few different plugins on each track, and then they all go through this main Malcolm bus up here. But then I also have a distortion back bus, which is just parallel compression on all of Malcolm's vocals that just literally adds some top end and again, more of the air on the vocal. That's one of the things that the vocals really take care of in a track. There's cymbals way up on top along with the air of the vocals, and especially when it comes to screaming, that is where a lot of that aggression comes from. So in this section in the break, I'll just play the vocals here for you and mute and then unmute the back bus so you can hear what it's doing.
Oh, their precious coins, their invested time, their corrupted means. From the mountains we emerge.
So you can hear it takes a lot of the top.
They took our bread, they took our food.
Adds back a lot of that air and top end aggression to it. It's a subtle layer, but it really helps thicken out the vocal and bring that aggression. And for that, I'm using this vintage oral exciter, which is, again, they're just very top endy, and then this compressor, which is just compressing it a lot to bring that out even more. And that's what helps with the body of the vocal, how the back bus is also bringing a lot of the body to it as well. And then moving along, we have Travis's main vocals here. So I'll just play this so you can hear what he sounds like.
Batista is one of them. Supports the exploitation of American industry.
So for these main vocals of Travis's, there's actually 4 of them happening. So we have kind of the lead vocal here, which has the most kind of processing on it, and it's really compressed, really in your face. Then there is the double, which is just a little bit lower in volume and just has more compression on it, and this faturator thing, which just adds a bit more of a lower body of a tone and distortion to it. And then there is the left and right triple and quadruple, which I panned out all the way left and right. So it's really wide in that section, and they've been edited so that they're very tight. The whole package of 4 vocals is just to really widen him out and thicken him up to make him sound just larger than life in the track. And that was kind of the same approach we had for the chorus vocals as well. Same thing for him. The screams, the main big screams that he has, and in the breakdown part where he screams, those are just tripled. We didn't need as many of those, but same kind of thing. One's dead center to really be in your face, and then the double and triple are panned left and right out a little bit to just widen out his vocals. And then they also added a whisper track in the breakdown as well to, again, I treated it the same way I did with Malcolm's in a sense where it's more to add that aggression in that section. I also have a distorted back bus for his vocal as well. Same exact back bus actually as Malcolm, just tailored a little bit more to Travis's vocal itself, but same principle as what I put on Malcolm's. And then moving along, we have Emmett's background vocals, which are harmonies and not really a feature in the song, but they just add that harmonic element of 1, another voice, and 2, just to thicken up and widen out different sections.
Batista is one of them. Supports the exploitation of American industry.
So as you can see, it's not hugely aggressive, it's not massive sounding, but it's just kind of compressed and held there so that it's keeping that tonality in the track without really needing to be super, super noticeable. So let me play Travis's vocal on its own, and then I'll add in Emmett's harmonies so you can hear how it thickens it out a little bit more.
Batista is one of them. Supports the exploitation of American industry. The man will make himself again oppressed.
It just adds something really nice. Their voices just work really well together. But as you can tell, Travis is definitely kind of the feature of it, and Emmett is just supporting him with extra harmonic content. And then the last thing in my session, I just have a bunch of reverbs and delays set up here, and that's just, I use them for most of the vocals. It's just easier for me to set up a series of reverbs and delays that kind of apply to everybody. So they're all kind of in the same room. So that's kind of the overview of everything that's in this track. Obviously, there's a lot of plugins on a lot of stuff here and a lot of automation to turn things up and down and change some EQ values as they're going and bypass different plugins for different parts that have different effects on them. It's just easier than creating new tracks, so I automate a lot of stuff. But it's just one of those things with a track like this where there's so much happening, you really need to focus as a mixer into what do you want the audience to hear? What do you want the listener to pay attention to? And you need to give it to them. Sometimes that's done very subtly, but you need to dictate that as the mixer. It's not a set and forget. You really have to make sure things move along over the course of the track. So that concludes this look inside the mix of History Will Absolve Me by Sons of Horus. Thanks for watching. Give this video a thumbs up if you found it helpful. If you have any more questions about this or anything else you'd like me to touch on how I did it, listen to the mix, listen to any other song on the record, and let me know, because I'll probably do a little bit of a breakdown for some of the other ones. So let me know what you'd like to see in these track breakdowns, because I want them to help inspire you what you can do with your productions. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, always be creating.